This is a freedom of navigation issue. It's a power play. Who gets to say that they're in charge of this waterway, the U.S. or Iran?
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. Today on the show, Iran has fired on U.S. ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So is the ceasefire over? Plus, Cherie Devaux made history as the first female trainer to win the Kentucky Derby. We speak to her about her monumental victory and how she's going to decide whether her horse, Golden Tempo, is going to go for the Triple Crown. Up first, though, the head of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, told reporters on Monday that Iran launched missiles at U.S. naval ships escorting commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The admiral also said that no personnel were injured and no ships were hit. The U.S. naval ships were part of a new operation that the Trump administration is calling Project Freedom. Now, this is coming as the U.S. says it is still attempting to negotiate an end to the war. And even before this most recent update, President Trump has been giving mixed signals on the state of those talks. So just how much could the situation in the Strait of Hormuz escalate? And are the peace talks still on the table? For more on this, I want to bring in Richard Engel, NBC News' chief foreign correspondent, who's on the ground for us in Jerusalem. Hi, Richard.
It's good to be with you.
It's good to have you. So CENTCOM, they confirmed this afternoon that Iran fired cruise missiles and drones and launched small boats to target ships in the Strait of Hormuz. That includes U.S.-flagged commercial ships and U.S. Navy ships that were protecting those vessels. The U.S. then used attack helicopters to blow up the small boats and intercepted the drones. What more do we know about what's really taken place in the Strait over the last few hours or so with the launch of Project Freedom?
It really goes back to this new mission. So early in the morning today, Project Freedom began, which President Trump said was going to be a humanitarian mission, but it's described by CENTCOM as a very broad mission, saying that Iran can no longer dominate control over the Strait of Hormuz and access through the Strait of Hormuz, and that the U.S. will facilitate the transit of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz to maintain the freedom of navigation, which is a very broad mission. And as soon as it began, things started to escalate. And the first ship that we heard getting attacked by Iran was an empty oil tanker from the United Arab Emirates. And then we heard more reports, cruise missiles, escalation, drones coming from Iran, the cruise missiles, 3 of them being blown up over the sea by the United Arab Emirates, a third falling into the water. Now we just heard from CENTCOM the variety of military activity that has taken place today, quite a bit of military activity, the most intense level of the war since the ceasefire began. But it began gradually, and it began with this new mission, this new operation that went into effect and announced by President Trump.
So in this CENTCOM hearing today, Admiral Brad Cooper said that 87 countries have been impacted or are being impacted with what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now. You reference what the president has said about why it is he was launching Project Freedom as a quote unquote humanitarian gesture to help the countries that were not involved in the war navigate through the Strait of Hormuz. From your reporting, Richard, do we know if these countries specifically asked the United States for help? Do we know who these sailors are? Do we know which countries are being impacted amongst these 87?
Well, there are certainly humanitarian cases, sailors that are stranded from many different countries. That has been reported by the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, which is the UN body that has those numbers, about 20,000 sailors and 2,000 ships. We know there have been requests for their assistance. So that is known. But the question, and what seems to be the big grievance between President Trump and the United States and Iran right now, is not so much the fate of these sailors, but what is the ultimate fate of the Strait of Hormuz? Who gets to decide if it's open or closed? And Iran says that it decides, and that it will, until there's a deal, that Iran will maintain its authority and exercise its authority, including by using force over the Strait of Hormuz. And just yesterday, Iran put forward what it was or described the 14-point proposal that it said it presented to President Trump. And in its most clear description yet, Iran said it wants to end this war by first settling the Strait of Hormuz, opening the Strait of Hormuz, getting the U.S. military to pull back, declaring an end to the war, a cessation of hostilities, and then working on the nuclear program, which Iran says is for civilian uses only, to be negotiated later by experts. Instead, just today, we're seeing this new mission to assure freedom of navigation, with the U.S. saying that it controls and it will dominate and who can go in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, and not leave that decision up to Iran, and Iran pushing back. And we're seeing this military flare up right now.
So also during the CENTCOM hearing, Admiral Brad Cooper said that no personnel had been injured thus far. No ships were hit. But off of what you were just saying, he did not address whether or not the ceasefire was in fact over. So you have this, negotiation that is ongoing, this proposal that is still on President Trump's desk that he is weighing. And now, though, you have what seems to be conflict within the Strait of Hormuz. So what does this mean for the ceasefire? Are they at war, again, just not over land, but over water? And did it really even end, Richard? Was there ever a ceasefire?
Okay, so these are all important questions, and they've become important legal questions because the Trump administration and President Trump himself has said, well, he doesn't need to declare this a war, even though 60 days of persistent conflict have passed, and doesn't need congressional approval because a ceasefire is in effect, right? But is what's happening right now a violation? Does it mean that the ceasefire is over, and does he have to go back to Congress? Nobody's saying that, but it does look like the ceasefire is certainly breaking down. We're not seeing right now direct attacks against Iran. We are not seeing direct attacks from Iran against Israel. But the war in Lebanon is going on, inside Lebanon and across the border. And that was supposed to be part of the ceasefire, according to Iran and the Pakistani mediators.
And according to Lebanon as well, but not
and according
to
to Lebanon as well, of course. So that is a lingering problem, which one could easily say is evidence that the ceasefire either never took effect or was violated, and therefore you need the 60-day approval from Congress, post 60-day approval from Congress. And now you have this. You have exchanges of fire, cruise missiles being launched, ships being attacked in the Strait of Hormuz. By any practical definition, yes, the ceasefire has either broken down or is breaking down or has already been broken.
Or was never even in effect, quite honestly.
Or was never even in effect. But according to the President Trump's own definition, which he is now interpreting as a legal definition and presenting it as such, the ceasefire is still in place.
What are people in the region saying? If you speak to people in the region, do they believe there is still an ongoing war?
People in the region that I've been speaking to are putting their hands up in frustration. I talk to people. I'm in Jerusalem. I've been coming to the city for many years. I know many, many people. And they say, we're caught in the middle of this. We're caught between Netanyahu and Trump and Iran. And they don't need it. They don't want it. And they're looking for a way out of this. It's getting expensive. It has the risk of reigniting the entire region again and again and again. And it seems reasonable. This seems like the kind of conflict where you could have a settlement. This is a freedom of navigation issue. It's a power play. Who gets to say that they're in charge of this waterway, the U.S. or Iran? And neither side is giving in. Now they're fighting over it. And many people that I'm speaking to are saying, and we're all paying the price. We're all paying the price for this.
Richard Engel, thank you.
Absolutely.
So as America watched the most thrilling 2 minutes in sports ever, nobody was more excited than Golden Tempo's trainer, Cherie Devaux. Devaux became the first woman to ever train a winning horse at the Kentucky Derby in what was her first race at Churchill Downs ever. the crowning achievement that brings her and Golden Tempo one step closer to one of the most elusive feats in all of sports, the Triple Crown. After Golden Tempo's unbelievable comeback victory with jockey Jose Ortiz, Cherie Devaux has made her way to our studio, and she's joining us now. Hi, Cherie.
Hi.
It's great to have you in studio.
It's great to be here. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, but
I can only imagine. And of course, we're coming to you with that pressure of what is to be, whether or not you can actually achieve the Triple Crown. But before we even get to that question, I want to go back to Saturday night. 23-1 odds. Golden Tempo, your horse, right, was in the back of the race.
Mm-hmm.
Second to last. That's where he was sitting. And then he started to make his way to the front of the pack. What was going through your mind? And did anything happen that day in the lead up to the race that made you think, maybe he's going to pull this out?
Well, we were actually very confident. His odds were appropriately long shot odds, but it was more by design. We have prep races that lead up to these big races, to the Kentucky Derby or any other big race. And he's a horse that needed to develop. He's kind of just always there for the ride, which is kind of indicative of how he runs.
Mm-hmm.
But I really couldn't believe that he won. It's been the joke all week that if he won, I was going to do a one and done and mic drop and then maybe go off into the sunset, because how do you top that?
Oh, come on. That never happens at the end of the day. You say it and then it happens.
Right. Well, I didn't think it was going to happen. I mean, honestly. And he has the way he runs is kind of, it's a bit boring to watch him, first in the race. But what I'm watching him, but I'm also watching the front of the race and to see the complexity of it.
Mm-hmm.
He was way far behind, and I was thinking, oh, man, I hope Jose is a man with a plan, because if he doesn't, we're going to have a lot to do, and that's the disadvantage of his running style.
When you talked to Jose afterwards, did you ask him if there was a moment in which he knew they could actually take this thing, that he felt it?
He is the reason the horse won. I mean, Golden Tempo won the race, but he made that happen.
Right.
Jose put him in the position. And Jose has been on him. Again, he knows the horse. He's ridden him all of his starts and a couple times in the morning workouts. So I don't know how confident he was, but I think he knew he was going to have a really good chance of getting there.
You actually did not start out in thoroughbred racing, right? Before we turned the mics on, you told me about how you participated in rodeos, in barrel racing as well. What got you to make the turn to thoroughbred racing?
The process for me was not linear. I was always a horse girl, and we started out with standardbred racing in my family, and my parents took a sabbatical and went down to Florida, and that's when I was competing in rodeos, and they unceremoniously dropped me off at school in Florida and went back to New York, and I was paying my own way through college. So when they left, it changed my residency, so I went up to New York, and I was going to school for pre-med to be a physical therapist.
Oh.
Once I got up there, I needed a job, and my mom was at the harness track, and they have auxiliary stabling, and she says, well, there's this job at the racetrack. They're called hot walkers. You just kind of walk the horses when they're done, and that's how I started. And
oh, really?
Yeah, I started as the hot walker, which is the entry-level position. I went through college. My 4 years of college, I didn't graduate. But I started exercise riding, and I broke my leg pretty significantly early on in my career as an exercise rider. So that's when I was coming back off of that injury, and my mentor named Chuck Simon, he kind of took me under his wing and gave me direction and said, you're probably going to want to take more of a management role, and taught me how to be an assistant trainer. But in 2017, I met my husband, and we were kind of talking about our future, and he asked, if we were going to continue our relationship, what I thought it looked like. And at the time, I was at a crossroads. I didn't want to continue being an assistant trainer. I was actually used to do bodybuilding and would compete in fitness competitions.
Wow.
And I thought, well, maybe I'll explore that a bit more.
Wait, so you were a bodybuilder and you were an assistant horse trainer?
Yes.
Okay.
So he says, you owe it to yourself to try to train on your own.
So you went from being a hot walker to a trainer, winning the Derby. You won the prestigious Breeders' Cup Mile back in 2024 as well. Now you're one step closer to being the first female trainer to win a Triple Crown. It's a male-dominated industry.
It is.
And seeing you win yesterday, I think for a lot of people was so incredible, not just because of your excitement, but because it was history in the making. Why do you think it is so male dominated? Why haven't women been able to break through?
Well, we're definitely underrepresented, and that's hard because, and it's a shame. There's actually a lot of women on the backside that make the stables go.
Yeah.
They're usually in the background, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I keep telling everyone I had 7 brothers and 2 sisters, and I had to really just always fend for myself in that respect. And I think I'm unique as a person, not just a woman in that individual. I kind of get knocked down, I get back up. I'm a horse trainer that's female. I've never made it for the plight of my gender, but I'm hoping that by being an example that, you just work hard and you take the lessons with the losses that, you can get there. It's hard and it's intimidating.
How do you think women can change the game? Becoming more a part of horse training and the industry as a whole?
Really just putting yourself out there. And I don't want to curse. So I really don't take,
Go ahead. No.
I take shit from nobody, but, and not in a bad way, but I have boundaries and I'm a respectful person. But if you're challenging a boundary or not being respectful, I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And that's hard because I feel like women in general are made not to have that constitution. We're kind of meant to be polite or just kind of be more demure. But I can't empathize with that because that's never been part of my constitution.
In a way, you're kind of an outsider to this, seeing how you started and then where you've landed. And I know that you've talked a lot about how this is so much for you about the love of horses. There has been a lot of criticism about the treatment of the horses when it comes to horse racing. Being kind of an outsider now, and now being an insider, right? Winning the Derby. How do you maintain the integrity of the animals, of the sport amidst kind of the criticism?
Well, when I first went on my own, ventured out on my own as a trainer, I created a list of core values. And one of those core values was to individualize the care of the horse. So down to how they trained, how they're treated. That's been my main focus as a trainer and as a person who loves horses. I don't have an ego about this. If we decided not to run, if Golden Tempo wasn't feeling great or he wasn't moving 100% the morning of the race, we wouldn't have raced him.
Mm-hmm.
As an industry, we've taken a lot of steps forward to protect the horse. There's an Horsemen's Integrity Safety Act, HISA. So they're an oversight body, and they hold everyone accountable. And now we have a lot of different technologies that are at our fingertips. And I'd say as a whole, our industry does put the horse first and trainers, but that's not 100%, and that had needed to change. And we're in that, and nothing is perfect. Like, no industry is perfect, and we have a long ways to go. But the steps in just how there's a lot more regulations on when you can do joint injections, a lot more regulation on what medication you can give the horse. We're racing right now in the cleanest, safest era of racing.
Okay, so everyone's obviously going to ask you about the Preakness. And I know you have your kind of canned answer. We don't know. We're getting through this, and then we're figuring out if he can do the next, right? And that's May 16th. Right? And that's basically the next step in the Triple Crown.
Correct.
So in assessing if you're actually going to do it, what goes into the assessment? Like, what questions are you asking yourselves? What conversations are you having to figure out if he's actually going to make it to the Preakness?
Right. So the first in the assessment of that is seeing how Golden Tempo is feeling. And we'll assess his energy level. We'll see how he's eating. We'll see if he's lost some weight from the race. Also how he's jogging up, how he feels physically. And then it'll be a combination. It'll be a discussion with the ownership group on if we're going to take that step. So Golden Tempo is ultimately going to decide if he's going to run, and we're going to decide, we'll have to see what signs he's giving us to see if that's what's right for him.
Cherie Devaux, we're going to be watching, obviously, come May 16th as to whether or not Golden Tempo is going to show up at the Preakness, but I'm feeling like I'm having a good feeling about him.
If not the Preakness, he'll have a heck of a rest of this year's campaign and going into next year. So no matter what we decide, he's an exciting horse, and I'm just really grateful and blessed to have him.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.